So now I'm going to have a look at the shadows from these sticks, even though I know we haven't done any work on them, but since we're working on the shadows, might as well add some there. And remember, there's no really visible shadow from the stick because it's quite high up into the ear. So I'll just soften these a little bit. And later we can soften them up more, or we can make them lighter if we'll have to. Okay, so now I'm going to go in with this. So this is a just a graphite pencil, so just full graphite. Again, if you don't know what this is, make sure you watch my other tutorial about graphite drawing materials. Now having it quite a bit wider just allows me to really get into the dark side, but also keep the shade quite soft without having too many lines. And remember, as you keep drawing, you just keep correcting yourself. That's the whole process. So again, don't panic if things don't look right the moment you start drawing. It's a process. Get back to that one later. Now over here. I know a lot of people don't think of drawing as layering, you know, this is something that is usually used with paint or, you know, other medium, but you still layer because you're creating darker and darker and darker shades. Sometimes you have to remove layers, sometimes you add more. That's the whole thing is just part of the process. Now I think it's probably time to add just a little bit more definition to the cherry sticks. So I've got this mechanic pencil, and I'm going to create shadow on one side. So if we look carefully, you'd be able to see that one side is a little bit lighter and the other one's a bit darker. It's not a very shiny surface, therefore we don't get the really strong white highlights, but nonetheless there is a shadow there, and we have to pay attention if we want to create a 3D look. And as the branch changes shape, so it sort of goes up and down, you can show that by having the shadow quite close to the object, but also by shading, you know, by creating the core shadow, or as I'd say, its own shadow to depict that. And then we've got that little bit where it joins to the branch, and that's why pencils like this are great for little things, little details, just because you don't have to stop and sharpen your pencil every time you need to get into something quite detailed. And actually on the cherry itself we can also see a bit of a reflection from this object here, so just a little bit of the darker shade going through there. That's why it's really important, the observational skill. It's really important. It's pretty much half of your success. And the other half is practice. Okay, so getting back into the shadow there. And just tiny little bit darker. There's also a really strong contrast again between the white table and the dark burgundy cherry. And the more we layer, the more attention we pay to all these things, the more realistic and three-dimensional it looks. And I'm assuming if you're following this along, you want to learn to draw things realistically. Because if you're going for something completely different, then you would probably have to follow different rules and steps altogether. So going back in here, making it a little bit darker. And then there's also a little bit of the texture on the cherries themselves. I don't know if you see, just here, if you look closely, there's like almost like a line, you know, like a softer version of what you'd get on plums and things. I mean, they're all related, so. And it's just happening very softly on our little cherry that we're drawing here. So I'm just going to softly put that line through. It's not very noticeable, but I'd say since we're trying to create a realistic depiction of it, you know, we might as well put all the details in. Okay, now let's go into this cherry and refine this one a little bit more, a little bit stronger. Now this contrast here, it's quite incredible. It's pretty much almost like black and white. So I'm just going to keep going over and over it. And then it sort of softly reduces that intense contrast, and you start to receive a little bit of reflection from the white table onto the cherry. This is what this area is, that's why it's just tiny, a little bit lighter. We can correct the shape as we're drawing. And even though it's quite light, it's still really dark when you compare it to the white of the table. So we need to shade all this in and tidy the side up a little bit more. And then this part here, this is where the cherry itself starts to receive a lot of this backlight, you know, that the light that bounces onto the table and then comes back onto the cherry as a reflection. So that's why the cherry is quite a bit lighter on the side, but we've got this falling shadow that becomes becomes quite dark when it's close to the actual object, and it helps us to create that 3D look. It's almost black here. This area is quite dark. And so is this. I try to position my camera in the way that it doesn't catch a lot of glare, but sometimes it's not possible because paper sort of warps a little bit, and you might be getting some of the light that's reflecting off graphite, because as soon as it gets quite dark it starts to reflect the light. Now I need to darken this area. And here we can actually see that bit where this little stick joins the cherry. I think the shape of this stick is a little bit different, but that'll do for now. So just a little bit more shadow, and the same thing here as well. It's receiving some light, so therefore it will have some shadow as well, but the shadow is not going to be as harsh as it will be on the cherry because of the color difference, and also because of you know, how matte the surface of this object is. Okay, so I'll just leave that for now there. My little smudge stick. So what I'm doing here is I'm going over some highlights that are just a little bit too light, just to soften them up a bit. And some shadows that are just a bit too harsh, so I can blend them in a little bit more. Okay, now while I've got the small smudge stick, I'm gonna go in and add a bit more definition to these thin little shadows. And just a little bit more here. Probably need to add just a bit more contrast on this little stalk. Okay. A bit more detail. Now I'm going to go in again with a large smudge stick. And go over some areas. Especially if you want them to be more blended. It's quite good. Just a little bit darker there. And now going for the step of taking back. So we gave it a lot of color. Now there are some areas where we just need to take some back. And or also tidy up, like for example this little bit here. I need to remove that. Maybe tidy up the shadow where it got a bit too blended with a smudge stick. So to correct the shape. There we go. And another little bit, oops, another little bit here. There, now I'm also going to soften it just a little bit, the shadow there from the stock, just a little bit. Then when it comes closer to the cherry, you can see on the image that it's actually quite clean. This area doesn't really have much shadow here as well. And I'm going to soften this because I think that got smudged a little bit too far out as well, just tiny little bit there. Okay, and maybe soften up some of this. Just tidying up the edge on the side. Okay, now some on this side too for this cherry. So what I'm doing at the moment, I'm just tidying things up. I'm not really removing too much, just a little bit for now. And then next I'm going to create more vivid highlights. At any stage when you're drawing, you can tidy up, and you can tidy up as many times as you'd like. It's personal preference. Some people just do it once at the end, some people do it 3 times or 4 times. If you find that some things are getting in the way of you seeing the drawing, I'd say it's time to tidy things up, remove the lines you don't need. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring some highlights, small little tiny highlights. We'll lighten the areas where we've gone too dark or smudged out of control. Okay, so just a little bit lighter there. A little bit lighter here, And remember, you need to pay really close attention to all the highlights, all the low lights, how deep things are, how light things are, because that's all you have to create the 3D effect on a 2D surface. So just a little bit here and there. Gets a bit stronger on that side. And then just a little bit more over here. Now let's have a look at our main highlight. Because it's a window, you can see kind of a, well, not necessarily the whole shape of the window, but you can kind of see lines and shapes that are reminiscent of the window, and you can put these in. At the same time as I'm doing these highlights, I would bring in my little smudge stick and just in some areas shade for just a little bit more contrast or smudging, you know, whatever it is that you feel is missing from your drawing, from your highlight more specifically. You can do that. Okay, so I just want to shade this over, and remember, don't be too scared. Like for example, if you think, oh, this is a bit too light, I want to shade it, but then what if I do it too dark? Well, you can shade it over, and then you can, you know, remove some graphite with your eraser if you need to. And even if something happens and you damage the paper and you can't remove it, don't worry, this is just a learning step. This is what I always tell my students, if you're creating sketches, just remember this is not your final work, so don't feel so precious about it, where you are actually scared to try things, you're scared to do things. This is why you need to do lots of practice sketches. If it turns out so beautiful you want to put it in a frame, so be it. If it turns out to be so bad in your opinion that you want to check it out and start again. The more you practice, the better you'll get. There's a little highlight here as well, little line, but I think I'll have to soften it up a bit. It's not too strong. There. Okay. So now we'll do the same thing with this cherry. It's quite strange, usually I go on this one and then to this one here. I've done this one first. Okay. So let's do some smudging. And then let's go in and pick up some of the highlights that we think just need to be a little bit lighter than they are at the moment. Just tiny little bit there. This whole sort of a side just has a glare from the white table. I don't know, is that the right way to call it glare, it's like a reflection. Some here. And just a little bit lighter, but not too light around this area. Just going to, let's get you a bit too light, but just remove some graphite. And now I'm going to go in for the highlight and make that a bit stronger. There and there, and a tiny bit here on the other side of the line. It actually just sort of goes up, just tiny little bit up. And we also have a tiny little highlight there. That's a reflection of something, whatever it is. It's hard to say. I think it's the same light that's causing that line there, so it's causing that little highlight. And in the photograph it has a really warm glow to it, so I'm not sure what it is. Maybe an object or something that's reflecting the light back from the window. Just softening that side. Okay, and now I'm just gonna go back in and really softly just smudge, over this area where I lifted some of the graphite off. I think maybe I lifted just a little too much, so I'm just going to smudge some. And another thing, I think I'm just going to go in back with the 9B pencil and just add a tiny bit more shadow. In some areas. Another thing that I think I've missed is this little dot on the bottom. I think that must be just a little leftover from the flower, but might as well put it in, why not? And then there's actually one here as well, in the little indentation, which is why it looks like a really tiny little darker shadow in there. You can do that too. If you're drawing along, these are the tiny little things. If you don't want to do them, you don't need to. But I just thought I'd show all the way, just in case if some of you might be interested in how to do these little bits as well. So there's that little one. And then here is this one. Just a bit darker there again. So that area I probably have gone darker and then lighter. Now I'm going over it with darker shade again. So it is that sort of going back and forth. Thing when you're observing your object. Now I'd say I'm pretty much finished, but maybe I'll just soften this a little bit. It does seem a bit too strong just on this side. And then just leave that one as the strongest highlight. And just go over the highlight there as well. Just make sure that this dark line is still visible. Okay, so I can say that this is probably done with. I'm pretty sure I'll look afterwards and notice something else that I should have done. Okay, well, I will call that it. So thank you very much for drawing with me, and I hope you have a lovely day. Please remember to check out the other videos that, if you haven't seen them, that might help you and explain in a little bit more depth all the other stages of drawing. Or you can always go on Patreon and follow me there for I think it's just $8 a month that you would be able to see all other videos that are not available on YouTube, with more tips and more extras that are very, very helpful. So thank you very much for drawing with me again. Hope you have a lovely day.